We are celebrating Bell Let's Talk Day today, and throughout the show, we're having different conversations around mental health. Right now, we want to put the focus on anxiety disorders.
Heavy breathing, sweating, pulse racing, tense, and an overwhelming feeling of panic. Everyone experiences these feelings from time to time, but for people living with an anxiety disorder, these feelings can severely interfere with daily life. They're hard to control, and they can last a long time. An anxiety disorder can affect anyone at any age. About 1 in 10 Canadians live with an anxiety disorder in any given year. If you are one of them, just know you're not alone, and there is help.
Here to shed a light on some of that help is Dr. Nasreen Khatri. She's a clinical psychologist who specializes in mood and anxiety disorders. Also joining us from Ottawa today, Samuel Breau. He sought treatment for generalized anxiety disorder. He now works with the Mental Health Commission of Canada. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Important conversations to have, so let's get started. We all experience, Dr. Khatri, stress and anxiety on different levels. It's part of everyday life. But for some people, it becomes much more serious. What are the signs that you know that it is, not just regular stress, but you actually have a mental health disorder?
Yeah, anxiety can really be a gift because it gives us adrenaline, it makes us be interested in things and more aware. Sometimes it can go the other way, though. So all mental disorders are really made up of two aspects. The first is that you feel subjectively distressed, so you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and feeling that everything is too much for you. And the other side of it is that you're having trouble functioning in 2 or more areas of life, so difficulty with relationships, dealing with work. And so I would say, in general, too much stress is, too much for you, and also that it's impacting your ability to cope.
All right, Samuel, I want to bring you into this conversation. You sought treatment. You recognized the symptoms for a generalized anxiety disorder. But can you take us back? Tell us about your experience growing up, when you first noticed the signs and when you realized maybe this was something more.
Yeah, so looking back, I don't think I had the language at the time, but as a young kid, and we know from experience and research now that most young adults that experience mental illness were experiencing unattributed physical symptoms. So as a young kid, I was overly anxious, worrying about big picture things that most kids my age wouldn't think about. I had persistent headaches and stomach aches, but I was still relatively okay in coping. And in fact, a coping strategy at that time for me was just to focus on school. I was one of those overachievers. When I started really noticing the disruption, as Dr. Nancy was mentioning, is really when I moved to university. So I was in a small rural town in New Brunswick, moving to a big city, the pressures of scholarships at university. And that's when I noticed slowly that I was becoming overly anxious in social settings. I had panic attacks, a tense stomach, and then eventually I started losing confidence in all of the things that I was used to doing. And so that was a signal for me that I needed to start looking at what I could do to bring back to myself, that spark and that energy that I was so used to having.
And what kind of treatment did you receive? And, what works for you now in those situations?
So treatment is it's been an interesting journey. For me, it started through psychology. And so I've developed a great relationship with my psychologist. And slowly I started realizing that psychology and mindfulness and all these other things alone wouldn't be sufficient. And so with my family doctor, we discussed medication. But ultimately, what really helped for me was to develop a lifestyle that helped me be at my best. And so looking at things like sleep, and we hear a lot about the importance of sleep, particularly for people living with mental illness, but for anyone really, we all have mental health. And so sleep, persistent, exercise, being really regimented around that, and then just being okay with the fact that I might not be feeling comfortable to join all of the multiple social events that we often get invited to. And so just being mindful about what I choose to take on versus taking on everything, because there's always opportunities around us.
Dr. Khatri, anxiety we know can manifest at any age. So we saw those pictures of Samuel as a young boy in school.
Yes.
You know, we hear a lot about it coming to a crux at university. But anxiety is something that can strike you at any age, and how it manifests can be different. Can you walk us through what that would be like, let's say, for somebody who's older or even seniors?
Yeah, so as we get older, anxiety can often have more of a physical edge. So oftentimes I find that clients sort of present with things like headaches, as Samuel mentioned, but also kind of feeling very nervous inside, having falls, having other kinds of nervous stomach, that kind of thing. So it can come out as physical symptoms as we age, and it can also be a response to losses and changes as we age. For example, physical illness and chronic illnesses such as heart disease, that kind of thing.
You know, anxiety, we talk a lot about the symptoms. We showed that piece off the top, you know, that overwhelming sense of you can't go on, or your heart is racing, or you're sweating. What is actually going on in our minds when you're feeling anxiety?
Yeah. So what starts to happen is that our cortisol level goes up, which is the stress hormone, which helps us to kind of have that flight or fight response, which means that we're getting ready for a potential threat. But in our world, it usually is not a physical threat, it's a psychological threat. And so our heart starts to race, our blood pressure goes up, and our breathing becomes more shallow. And so all of these things start to kind of deoxygenate the brain, which simply means that it's harder to think straight, to make decisions, and to feel that we're kind of in control.
You know, Samuel mentioned treatment for him. Something he still does now is, you know, a routine and sleep and exercise. Is it really that simple? Because for anybody who's ever experienced, you know, an anxiety attack, it sounds like a very simple solution for something that feels so overwhelming.
Right. Well, I would say, first of all, it's really important to get that checkup from the neck up and to have the assessment with a mental health professional to get a sense of where you stand, sort of clinically. But in terms of what we can all do for mental health, for sure, in terms of anxiety, exercise is going to be wonderful, because what it does is it actually helps us to grow new brain cells in the hippocampus, which is kind of where the crossroads of mood and memory come together. In other words, it helps mood, it helps memory, and it helps our kind of general functioning. So
All right.
It's very helpful.
Dr. Khatri, such an important conversation. Thank you for giving us the science perspective to it. And Samuel, thank you for your personal story that you shared with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Just a reminder, we've got links to Anxiety Disorders Association of Canada and the Mental Health Commission on our website, yourmorning.ca.